We're joined with Congressman Peter King. He is the representative for the 2nd District of New York, and he's also on the subcommittee, chairs the subcommittee on Counterterrorism and Intelligence, Homeland Security in the House. Congressman King, thanks so much.
Great to be here. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for taking time to talk a lot about policy because it's August recess now. You have an ambitious legislative agenda that the president has put forth. So what's the plan going into September?
Actually, we have a lot of basics to get done in December. We have to, first of all, keep the government open because the fiscal year ends September 30th, and we have to either adopt a spending plan for next year, or we have to keep the government open at 30-day intervals or 2-week intervals, which is always a bit like playing Russian roulette. So that's the main thing. We also then, I think healthcare is going to be pushed to the side for a while. As far as the whole tax reform, there's somewhat a difference in the party. I am urging tax cuts rather than tax reform. The reason I say that is tax reform, I think that could be another debate going on forever. I mean, there's talk of part of the reform would be to eliminate the property tax deduction, the mortgage interest deduction, the state income tax deduction, and I don't see any way you can get a bill through doing that. I wouldn't vote for myself.
Is it because you wouldn't vote for it? Is it because you wouldn't get Democrats on board? Because you would think tax reform, you could get some Democrats.
No, they feel the Democrats will not support us, and what they want to do is they want to do it under this arcane system of reconciliation, which means we can do it with 51 votes in the Senate. We don't need Democratic support. But to do that, you can't make any policy changes. You just have to move the numbers around. So in any event, make a long story short, the only way they feel they can get the numbers to add up is by eliminating a lot of these deductions, which are very, very helpful to Long Island. So that would be damaging to us. I think we should go with tax cuts. That's what Reagan did in 1981. He had across-the-board tax cuts. 5 years later, he did tax reform.
So you think tax cuts is the vehicle to get there because, you know, President Trump has proposed comprehensive tax reform that would include both corporate and individual. So you would have, you know, simplifying the tax code, first of all, 7 brackets to 1 bracket, to 3 brackets rather. You would have the corporate tax rate, reduce that from the highest it is in the industrialized world and bring that down to 15%, plus repatriation. These are all things that would boost the economy. And right now the market's banking on, at the very least, tax cuts. Do you think that President Trump will ever get tax reform? Because, like you said, we haven't had it since 1986, and both parties have been trying to push it through.
I think to get it through, we have to get the party in a stronger position, and that's why you need tax cuts. Tax cuts, to me, be a lot easier to get Democrats on your side. Have tax cuts, again, bring down that corporate tax rate, bring about the repatriation, and also to provide tax cuts for, again, working class, middle income people who are the backbone of the country.
Now, President Trump has also taken regulations and have slashed them over 800 regulations. Also, in addition to that, he has an executive order that says any new regulation to have to be cut. That has had an impact on the market. Have you seen an impact for your constituents on Long Island?
Mainly from people that work in Manhattan, work on Wall Street, work in the banking sector. I think that's where you'd see that impact first. But when you see that impact there, then within a year or two, you're going to see more jobs being created. It's going to. I fully support what he's doing as far as cutting back on the regulations. They got totally out of control.
Right, and 41,000 manufacturing jobs so far have been created. There's a lot more work that has to be done. So, do you think if we start with tax cuts, do you think companies will come back? I think at least you do a repatriation, even if you do it in small bills.
Right.
When you think that repatriation, you lower the corporate tax rate, you allow them to bring it in for maybe 10% tax, and then you're going to be able to have companies investing in American workers, and obviously that's President Trump's philosophy, is putting American workers priority first.
Yeah, the goal, I think repatriation is absolutely essential. It's important to do it, and I think, again, on that, we should be able to get a certain amount of bipartisan cooperation.
All right, let's move to healthcare. You said you want to put that off. Why wouldn't you go back to healthcare? I mean, the House passed the American Health Care Act. The Senate, obviously, you fell by 1 vote short.
Well, it fell by 1 vote as far as proceeding. There were not enough votes to pass it in the Senate.
Right.
Yeah, it wouldn't have passed. I mean, I know that I can think of at least 3 or 4 senators who would have voted to not voted for that version of it. All that was going to do was basically repeal it without having any replacement in there.
Yeah.
The problem we have with it right now is that you've had Obamacare in for 4, 5, 6 years, however you want to start the opening date. And so a lot of local governments, state governments are dependent on flows of income streams from Medicaid expansion, for instance, being one example. That can't be changed overnight, and that's why I think we need a more comprehensive bill. I voted for the bill in the House, but I wasn't that crazy about it, and I basically said I wanted changes. If it came back to the House, I wanted some changes made. The Medicaid especially, I mean, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, but New York State increased Medicaid expansion or adopted it, extending it to 800,000 new people. And so state governments, local governments are sort of based on that. Now we have to find a way, if we're going to get out of it, to ease out of it, not just, you can't just end that overnight.
Yeah, it's funny because healthcare is something that, every party tries to tackle, both parties, and the Republicans, it seems like they are very, in a negative way, they're very diverse. Whereas, Democrats follow along with each other. Republicans, seem to not get on the same page. Everyone has different, some very conservative, some moderate. Do you think you can ever, as a party, get together on that issue? Because you're basically dealing with an entitlement, and how do you play with that?
I think we can if we accept the fact that it's not going to be repealed entirely, that there are parts of it that are going to have to remain just reality to get the 218 votes, or if we're going for to get it through the Senate to get the 51 votes, or actually to get 60 votes really, I guess is what you need
right.
to get it through the Senate. We can get, I think, 218 in the House. For instance, we got 218 the last time. We would have gotten more, I believe, if we had allowed more of the Obamacare language to stay in there for now. It doesn't have to stay in there forever, but again, you can't change something overnight once it's there.
Do you think, similar to tax reform, you could do small bills to repeal health care and replace at the same time?
That's something we can look at, yeah, sure. And again, we were going for all or nothing, and it was done for different procedural reasons. I think it's going to make more sense to do it part by part.
I want to ask you about Obamacare subsidies, because President Trump is threatened to terminate the insurance subsidies, or when he has a bailout. That's not sabotage, even though that's been the narrative by the media and Democrats, is that it would be sabotage. But there's a CBO report that said that the silver plans would increase by 20% with the better health care plan put through. Says that, well, Congress never appropriated the funds for the subsidies. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, and Paul Ryan had sued the Obama administration, found out that these payments are being made without funds for it.
And that suit is on hold right now, even though we won it at the district court level.
Right. Yeah. And the federal judge said that it's unconstitutional, these payments. Payments are still being made. Nothing has been said about it. Either President Trump halts it or you fund the subsidies, and that would probably decrease premiums, balance the insurance marketplace for now. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, again, it's not been looked into enough. I understand the reasoning behind withholding the payments, but on the other hand, I think if it is done too quickly, you can risk undermining the markets and causing unintended consequences. And that's the danger of doing all this without having hearings, without doing it in a more extensive way. So we're ready for all the possible consequences.
What about Obamacare taxes? Because there are a lot of taxes in the bill that actually, if you take those out, would relieve employers and employees of these taxes.
Yeah, again, this is all part of what has to be done. The problem is we try to do almost all or nothing, and that's the problem.
So we're in September. The
reason I'm saying, rather than get bogged down, because I don't see any way they're going to get to 51 votes in the Senate, or to 50 votes even, have the Vice President cast his vote. So let's get points on the board, let's show results to the American people, do tax cuts, and then also do infrastructure.
Right, and I think the Trump administration at this point is looking for a win, especially that we've gotten to September. You have a lot of obstruction from the other side. The debt ceiling is also a next big thing, and you had alluded to that. So Treasury Secretary wants a clean, debt ceiling bill, nothing attached to it. Interestingly, President Trump tweeted earlier that he would have wanted the VA bill that was just passed into law that he signed the other day. He wanted that to be attached to it, but regardless, do you think this debt ceiling will go smoothly, or it's been tough working with both parties?
Yeah, I think it should. To me, I would vote for a clean debt ceiling. This is money we owe, and to get bogged down again, the longer we get bogged down in that, because ultimately we're going to have to pass it anyway, that means we can't get to tax cuts, we can't get to infrastructure. I want to get right to tax cuts and right to infrastructure. Right,
and you mentioned infrastructure. It was interesting because when I was looking at our infrastructure compared to other countries, China, they've built about 150 airports, a little bit more than that, in the past couple of years. They're in the midst of a major infrastructure development. Our country, 0 airports. You know, LaGuardia here in New York is
Right.
one of the worst dilapidated airports. President Trump brings that up a lot. Where are we with an infrastructure plan? And you would think that should unify both parties. You should be able to get a bipartisan bill.
Yeah, I don't know where we are. The reason I'm saying it is I hear different stories from different people. I think that, again, is important where the White House has to get moving. They should be dealing with the House and the Senate. And because to me, there's so much there. And that has the potential, a real potential, for bipartisan agreement. There's so much there that can be done. It's not going to be perfect, but there's enough to bring Democrats, I think, into the fold on that one to get it through. So if you combine tax cuts and infrastructure, you're providing funding, you're finding funds for working people, for middle-income people, and you're making permanent improvements to the country.
Now, let me ask you, as someone who has passed a lot of bipartisan bills and has co-sponsored a lot in your term, where is this, debate going to go? Is there going to be true debate between both parties? Because it seems like anything President Trump wants to put forth, and he has a very ambitious agenda,
Right.
a lot of it should be nonpartisan, but it seems like anything President Trump is going to do, they're going to oppose, even if it's infrastructure. Is there going to be debate?
The reason that we can make progress in infrastructure is there's enough there for senators who are in states that President Trump carried, Democratic senators. Right. And so whether it's true love or whether it's survival, I think there are a number of Democrats we can bring on board for tax cuts and for infrastructure. It won't be perfect for Republicans, but we can make it a 70-30 or 75-25 Republican bill on infrastructure and on taxes, I believe, and bring in enough Democrats to get us over the hump.
So the border wall is another key Trump promise. Interestingly, that was supported after 9/11 by both parties. And part of the wall was built, and President Trump actually visited Yuma, Arizona, and visited the border that's made there. They made a lot of progress. In fact, Homeland Security Secretary Elaine Duke wrote an op-ed in USA Today emphasizing that border wall's work, that while they're arresting an average of 800 illegal aliens a day, they're unable to stop trucks unless the wall is there. These trucks are smuggling in people. They're smuggling in heroin and drugs are being sold to our kids. Border wall was supported by both parties after 9/11. Now the Democrats say we're not building the wall. President Trump has made this a key campaign promise. What are your thoughts on the wall?
Actually, the bill that passed back in 2006 was my bill. I was then chairman of the Homeland Security Committee.
Right.
I think the wall is important, and you're right. Even Hillary Clinton supported it at the time. I'm not sure about President
Chuck
Obama.
Schumer did.
Schumer did, yeah.
Obama did, yeah.
Okay, so I know that Schumer and Clinton did. It's just taken on a whole political overtone, and somehow it's considered racist to have a border wall, even though Democrats voted for it then. I think, again, that's when a solid majority of the American people will support us on that, and the president has to make that argument. That's why it's important for the president to avoid side issues. On the key issues, the American people are with us. On tax cuts, they're with us. On the border wall, it's two gut emotional issues and also substantive issues that the American people are with us on.
Well, and that's why I'm glad we can have discourse, because it seems like with all the vile rhetoric that is going on in the country, that these things that should be basic national security issues, maybe the funding gets debated. The House did pass $1.6 billion to fund the wall recently.
Right.
It goes to the Senate now. You would think that at this point you would have some better discourse, and especially given the events of Charlottesville and then even the congressional baseball field shooting, we think we come together as a country and say, let's stop the nonsense and let's get on the same page.
Yeah, unfortunately, those feelings of bipartisanship don't last long. I know the Democrats are under tremendous pressure from their left wing, the Bernie Sanders people, the resistance people, the progressive people, that any type of compromise at all, they seem to look upon as treason or listen, to me, if you could put Donald Trump and Chuck Schumer in the room with Paul Ryan, we can work something out. I think Chuck Schumer is very concerned about the left wing of his party. Paul Ryan may have concerned about the Freedom Caucus in our party. We have to work around that. We have to get it done.
So one of the reasons why Donald Trump was elected was his campaign promise to, quote unquote, drain the swamp.
Right.
What are congressmen and congresswomen's feelings about drain the swamp? He's talked about term limits. Interestingly, as I was doing research, I found out something new, that you actually have term limits on committees, and that's why you were not the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. You're chairman of the subcommittee. So I found that interesting, that if you could have term limits on yourselves, would you impose term limits on all of Congress?
No, I'm totally against term limits.
Okay, why?
It takes away the right of the American people to vote for the candidate they want. And that's basically it. And also, I don't see why that makes it better. The person's doing a good job, why not let him run? If he's doing a good job with his constituents, why should they be denied the right to elect him or her to the job?
Do special interests get in the way?
They can get in the way anyway. In fact, if someone has to step down, I mean, special interests have been there forever.
Right.
And term limits wouldn't solve that. If anything, it may make it more extreme, because then you would find in these races, the first time you'd find more money being pumped in than ever.
Okay. You met with President Trump recently in Brentwood, Long Island,
Right.
not far from here, to talk about the MS-13 gang. And
Right.
we're going to go into Homeland Security and MS-13 in a second. Now, you said when you were with President Trump that you had frequent conversations with the president, that you have a good relationship. You would say that you're working well with him on Homeland Security issues?
Congressman King and his colleagues know the terrible pain and violence MS-13 has inflicted upon this community and this country. For many years, they exploited America's weak borders and lax immigration enforcement to bring drugs and violence to cities and towns all across America. They're there right now because of weak political leadership, weak policing, and in many cases because the police weren't allowed to do their job. I've met police that are great police that aren't allowed to do their job because they have a pathetic mayor, or a mayor doesn't know what's going on.
He's been extremely helpful. Both he and Attorney General Sessions, and when he was at Homeland Security, General Kelly, its secretary, phenomenal. It's night and day between the Obama administration and the Trump administration, certainly from the presidential level and from the Attorney General level. The Homeland Security Secretary under President Obama was actually pretty good, but the policies were not from the Obama administration. President Trump wants to empower ICE. He wants to empower Homeland Security. He is going to stand with the police. With MS-13, the fact that the President of the United States, with all the issues in the country, could find the time to come to Brentwood, Long Island, to personally go beyond the ground in addressing the MS-13 issue, shows the intensity. And you've had many, many more arrests over the last several months, made by, in some cases, by the local police who are doing a good job, but with strong, strong support from the federal government. The number of arrests is really going up, and MS-13 is on the run. Having said that, it's still going to be a long, hard fight, but they are definitely on the run right now. The president basically is not worried about political correctness.
Yeah.
And no, he is going to be extremely helpful. Attorney General, he is basically put the word out to the Justice Department. He wants MS-13 prosecuted stronger than ever before.
Well, I don't understand why that's a partisan issue either, because the MS-13 gang, they're brutal. They're killers. Just on Long Island last month, 17 MS-13 thugs were indicted in multiple killings. Mm-hmm. You had bars raided, and an individual had illegally re-entered, so came into our country across the border. In the first quarter of 2017, you had 11 killings linked to MS-13. You had a 17-year-old gang member filmed and narrated a 15-year-old girl's killing. Mm-hmm. And the Suffolk County Sheriff, Vincent DeMarco, said that these new gang members are coming in basically on a conveyor belt. And they're coming through part of Mexican cartels. So they're selling drugs. There are about 8,000, 10,000 members in about 42 states, maybe more. They're brutal, and they don't necessarily use guns, and they go after other illegal immigrants. President Trump is going after that. How come, well, first of all, do you see progress? And second of all, how come there's division on that issue?
There's real progress being made by the president, by Homeland Security, by the FBI, by Suffolk and Nassau County Police. They are making progress. However, we're not getting all the support we need from the community, mainly because so-called leaders in the community basically urge the people not to cooperate. They want to portray this as a plot by Donald Trump, by me, by Attorney General Sessions, to use the arrest of MS-13 as an excuse to deport immigrants from this country. It's horrible. They're putting fear. These are people who live in low-income conditions. There's crime in those areas, and they are being told that this is a plot by the president just to find out who they are and lock them up. It's absolutely terrible.
Well, let me ask you to that point, because I had a conversation, I've done multiple interviews with a retired immigration agent, Michael Cutler. You may know him. He testified in front of the 9/11 Commission. And he made it very clear that cooperating illegal aliens are provided with visas by law enforcement if they speak up about crimes. And I've spoken to people who know other illegals that are involved in some activity, and they said that if they knew that they could speak up without repercussion, they wouldn't. I said, well, that is the law, that you can speak up. And they're soothed by that, but the narrative is President Trump is evil, the Republicans want to deport illegal immigrants. That's not so. How come the messaging hasn't been prevalent on that?
When the Attorney General was here, he tried to make it clear that there was no intention to arrest people to come forward or deport people to come forward. They're encouraging people to come forward. And I'm not aware of any instance on Long Island where any attempt was made to deport someone who came forth. Even when other illegals or undocumented are arrested, they're not being targeted. If there's 67 MS-13 people in the house is raided, and there's also 2 others there who are undocumented, they are going to be brought in. There's no doubt they're here illegally. But they are not the ones who are being targeted. It's MS-13 that's being targeted.
So Attorney General Sessions has also sought out to defund sanctuary cities, and that's caused an uproar. But I look at cities that have liberal mayors, like Chicago. Over 400 murdered so far, 781 last year. It's total chaos, and this is a city with strict gun control. And, all he's saying is we need law and order. How come that, or I don't know, has progress been made on that? Is there going to be some working relationship there to get rid of these sanctuary cities that harbor criminals?
There has been progress. In Florida, it's been turned around in some cities. Again, these just become emotional issues. They become political issues that are demagogued. I don't think 20 years ago people thought we'd be having this debate.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton in the State of the Union, I think in 1996 and 1995, said that the danger of having having any illegal immigration at all is there. And now it's reached the stage where you have illegal immigrants coming in, and again with MS-13, I think 7 of the last 11 people indicted for MS-13 murders in Long Island were these unaccompanied minors that came across the border.
Yeah.
So not only were they undocumented, they came across and were put into a special federal program and still carried out these murders.
Yeah, ICE estimates that about 1.2 million criminal illegal aliens are out on the run, and we don't know anything about them. So they're not necessarily on law enforcement's radar because we don't have any information on them, and they just came in across the border. I want to move on quickly, and I appreciate you taking time today. The opioid epidemic. What's the latest on that? I know there's a problem in your district and really across the country.
We're losing more people to opioids than we lost in the Vietnam War. This is not just a low-income, inner-city tragedy. This is affecting middle-income, upper-income people across the spectrum of society. First of all, a lot more has to be done as far as strict law enforcement, but also to provide more education, to make people more aware of what symptoms to look for. Also, doctors have to be make clear to them they can't be overprescribing. So much of the opioid abuses and deaths come from overprescription by doctors. But it's really going to take an awareness by people. This is not something that's happening far away. This isn't something in some inner city that they've never been to. This is happening right here on Long Island, right around us, right in neighborhoods where from the outside everything looks perfect. But inside there are people dying or suffering from opioid abuse.
Well, so I can tell you an estimated 2 million plus Americans are dependent on opioids, and overdose deaths for both prescription and heroin quadrupled since 1999. It's a real tragedy.
And in addition to that, not only do you have the opioid abuse, which could lead to suicide or deaths, it also leads to more crime because people become desperate to get the opioids. And in fact, a good friend of mine, John Capano, he was a ATF agent who was off duty, and he was murdered in a drugstore in Seaford, Long Island. He was going there to pick up a prescription for his father, and a person who was just out of jail, who was an opioid abuser, was there attempting a holdup.
Are any actions being taken to make the American Medical Association and pharmaceutical corporations accountable?
Yeah, Governor Christie just had a commission which released an interim report. More pressure is being put on the medical profession for them to realize the obligation that they have. More pressure is being put on local schools. But again, this is still a work in progress because it's not something that's easily definable until the American people realize how serious. Until the American people realize how serious it is, it's going to be hard to really effectively address it.
So the AMA put this out in January of this year, Patrice A. Harris, a medical doctor and the chair of the AMA Board of Trustees, said that to address substance this abuse problem, that they have to label them as brain disorders, as true medical diseases, and not a social and moral failing. What are your thoughts on that?
No, that was, first of all, I agree with that, and I know the Governor Christie's commission is recommending that Medicaid money be allowed to be spent for opioid treatment, and it would put it in a classification where local and state governments and hospitals can use Medicaid money.
What about keeping doctors accountable to be more judicious in their prescribing?
Yeah, a lot of that has to be imposed by medical organizations themselves. But again, I think pressure from the federal government is very necessary.
Before I let you go, this is the contract the American voter President Trump put out. People voted for him. They want to keep him to keep his promises. Do you think that these promises will be kept?
Yeah, I think they will, as much as they can be. As I said, I don't think we can do a complete repeal of health care under Obama. We can certainly make significant changes. I think on taxes, on foreign policy, on terrorism, on defense spending, on building up the military, you're going to see an excellent job by the president.
Congressman King,
Appreciate
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much.